Is over here okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, so I'd like to welcome everyone to the second professional panel being hosted this semester by SLA at Simmons, the student chapter of the Special Library Association. My name is Simone Schloss, and I'm treasurer. I'm the new treasurer of the organization, and I'd like to welcome you on behalf of Liz, our president. Today we have 3 speakers. It's going to be very exciting. I'm very excited. Our first speaker is going to be Betty Edwards. She is a fellow of the Special Library Association since 2008. She joined Draper Lab in 2010 after many years of experience in the online provider world. At Draper Lab, she is senior research analyst in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Draper is a not-for-profit independent research and development facility focused primarily on Defense Department and NASA work. And prior to this, she was a part of the law firm of Seyfarth Shaw, LLP. After she presents, the point of the presentations are to, for the speakers to tell us about their careers in special libraries. They're free to shape it any way they want. When we had speakers earlier in the semester, we were very interested to hear the paths that they took, so we invite you to speak about that as well as your current work. Next will be Claudette Newhall. She is from the Congregational Library, and she's been librarian since 2010, having joined the Congregational Library staff in 2005. We're very excited to have her back to bring more of this particularly interesting and exciting perspective on special libraries. Prior to the Congregational Library, Claudette was in banking and financial services. And our final speaker will be Robert Seidel, who is he's the team lead for research and awareness in the Knowledge Services Group at Lincoln Laboratory. He oversees a staff of 8 and 5 library professionals. He's been at Lincoln Lab for 25 years, so a lot of his story will be about Lincoln Lab. But if you want to tell us about those formative years, Ron, we're excited about that as well. There will be time afterwards for questions, and I don't know if you can put a little picture over there of our beautiful T-shirt, but we would like to encourage early RSVPs for our events because we like to order the right amount of food, and we want you to come once you RSVP. So in general, we are going to try to offer some kind of an incentive for RSVPing and then showing up. You'll be among those that have a chance at winning a T-shirt in the size you want and the style you want. I picked what I liked. So does anyone need to leave early? Because we want to do the raffle before people. What time will you be leaving?
Class at 1.
Right, okay, so I think maybe we'll see 40 minutes. We probably have time for all 3 speakers. We'll see where we are after Claudette's finished speaking, and if we're close to 1 by any chance, then we'll do our drawing. Anna, you'll help me with that. You'll pick somebody, not an SLA officer. And if you don't like the size, just be in touch with me. I'm Schloss at Simmons.edu. So with no further ado, Betty.
Great, thank you. As Simone mentioned, I've been at Draper Lab for about almost 4 years now, but I'm what's known as a boomerang employee. I actually started my career there 27 years before that. So while I was at Simmons, I got a job at Draper Lab as a library assistant, and what was great at that time was Draper paid for my entire degree from Simmons, which at that time was, you'll say, only $9,000, but it equates to your $36,000 now. So that was a great benefit. Plus, I got a salary as well and great experience. So I stayed there for 3 years while I was getting my degree, and then afterwards I stayed for another 3 years in a professional position. And after that, I went on to Lincoln Laboratory. You probably didn't know that, did you?
No.
No, I didn't work in the library. I worked for a radar group as a software librarian. And It was interesting because I organized all the tapes and everything, but then once we were organized, I was bored to tears. So that's when I got really involved in SLA. I had all this time, they didn't care what I did. So I got really involved in SLA, and one of the things that I really wanted to mention here today is the professional associations and how important they should be for you. I couldn't have had the career that I've had without the support of SLA. That's really been the only one that I've been involved with my entire career. But as far as people approaching me for jobs, for support, when I didn't know something about some topic of research, feeling that I had a community to go to. And through all of my jobs now, I've had this great support system. So even this morning at the lab, someone came in with some really esoteric chemistry question or something, which is not my area of expertise at all. So I, sent something out to some people that I knew could help me, and the answers kept flying back. Did you check this? I think this is what you're looking for, and I do the same for when people I see people put out messages as well. So just to keep that network going and the strong ties. So after I left Lincoln Laboratory, after about a year or so, I went to Putnam Investments, which is a financial services firm downtown Boston, and I was on a really cool project in competitive intelligence. So I got my start with that field there, and just doing a lot of background research on companies that they were going to be dealing with, and it was just, I found it so exciting to be doing all the online research. After that, I went on to manage the libraries of a division of Motorola. So it was 3 libraries down in Mansfield, Massachusetts area. There was a manufacturing library, an R&D library, as well as a business library. Stayed there for about 7 years, did a lot of business development there, which I learned to really like. I love helping the companies that I work for make money, and I just find it really exciting when we get the contract. So that was a good turn as well. I also did a stint in the vendor world, which was exciting. So I worked for Dialogue, which some of you may have heard of. It's now a division of ProQuest. So I was a sales rep for the New England area, and then my territory actually extended out to the West Coast after that. So I would have a lot of the big clients such as IBM and Xerox. I loved the job. I loved visiting clients, showing them how to use the product. And I'd really like to make a push for exploring jobs in the vendor world. They're always looking for librarians because librarians understand the process, the product. They're looking for trainers, people in sales, back office operations. And I think that they just really find it invaluable having the experience from us that can help sell to their other customers and explain things as well. So one of the things that also I wanted to mention is I know that Simmons puts, it seems that Simmons puts a lot of its emphasis on academic libraries and school libraries and public libraries, but I really want to give a push for corporate libraries and special libraries. There's so many exciting opportunities there, and I find from speaking at Simmons classes that a lot of the students don't realize that there are many, many exciting jobs in these types of environment. Some of the things that I learned from being in the vendor world, I was asked to speak about challenges, is I had talked about previously forming all of these great relationships with librarians when I was a librarian. But then when I got a job with Dialogue in the vendor world, a number of people snubbed me, if you can believe it. People that I had close relationships with that I would see at SLA meetings, we chat and have fun and commiserate. After I went to what was called the dark side, which is a really unfortunate term, this one librarian, she really was down on me. And unfortunately also, I became her account rep, so I had to deal with her. So we went from having a great relationship, as when we're both librarians. Then I was in a different kind of a role, so I had to really, really work hard to reestablish myself with her and to gain credibility, and that took a good year. But we were able to do that, and then the relationship got back to where it was. But I was so shocked by that. I never expected that at all. But one of the things about being in the vendor world too is that you get to understand all of the buying processes, such as for the products that I was selling. I was actually selling for a time to academic libraries, and what I would sell for $5,000 to an academic library, you'd sell for $30,000 to a corporation, which was really interesting. And since I had never worked in academic libraries either, and as a corporate library, I would make decisions very fast after I saw a product. Within 2 or 3 weeks, either I wanted it or I didn't, and I was on to something else. I learned that in academic libraries, the buying process is so long. It would be 9 months. I'd go in and do a presentation, and I thought that everything went well, and they liked the product. Then I wouldn't hear anything for 9 months, and then all of a sudden the phone call comes, bang, we got funding, we need it on the desktops next week. So it was interesting seeing that whole buying process as well. Also in the vendor world, the negotiating processes as well. And so I had learned a lot from that. And one of the hard things about being in the vendor world, though, also is it can get very tough when you're expected to have a certain number of sales. It's called having the pipeline. So I could say that I had been to, Claudette's library or Bob's, and I think they like the product. There's a 50% chance they're going to sign, or 90%. And then at the end of the month it comes. Bob doesn't sign for whatever reason, so then I'm on the carpet, well, why didn't Bob sign? So it's like, what am I going to do? Have his, force his pen to the contract. So that was kind of interesting, having to get used to that. So, but I can honestly say that where I am now, it's really been great having worked on both sides, because you get to know both sides of the equation, from the librarian equation as well as what the vendors are hoping to get as well. Let's see what else. Points. The other thing I wanted to mention is getting on library advisory boards to help vendors make better products. I'm currently on 3 of them. I had mentioned that I work for ProQuest Dialogue. They have a library advisory board, and I wasn't on it. I heard about it, and I actually asked to be on it. I'd heard that they were going to choose 12 librarians from the United States and 12 from Europe. So I sent an email. And I mentioned that I had worked for the company. I'd love to be on the advisory board, and I was selected as one of the 12 from the United States. And what was really cool was my first year on the board, they took us all to Barcelona for the user group meeting, so that was tough. And then the following year, it was in Washington, and then now it seems like it's always in the United States. But that was incredibly exciting as well, and just to see how the products are developed, and the whole back scenes as well. How many more minutes do I have? Is anyone keeping?
Oh, if you want to speak
Okay,
another 2 minutes, you're welcome to.
Let's see what else here. And then also, again, just to push for the for SLA and professional associations. You get so much out of it, and you get more out of it than I can ever imagine. But if there's any questions, either now or later. Thank you.
I just was going to ask about Putnam. I was wondering, after you left, if you kept up and found out whether they continued to have a library, or
you know what?
Some of us took the corporate libraries course, and it's all about survival, really, in that kind of a world.
Yeah, oftentimes it is. It really is. I honestly don't know.
I know. The answer is no.
Oh, they don't?
No.
Oh. And it was a huge, there were a lot of us too. I think there were 14 of us or something. But that's one of the things about special and corporate libraries. All the time you really have to justify your existence. And one of the things that I do is justify it all the time after I do research for people. 3 or 4 months afterwards, I'll go back and ask for metrics. How has this helped you? And people will write great paragraphs, that we're working on this contract. It saved us, millions of dollars by not pursuing it. So the time and money saved, we bundle it into a report and send it up the channel. And it really opens people with the purse strings, their eyes open about how we've helped on this. Yes.
I was interested about the Draper Lab, and I was wondering, could you tell me how large that library is, and being, and what would be the background for some of, general background for some of the librarians? Do they have backgrounds in science, or?
No, none of us do. We're all like sociology majors.
Art history.
Art history.
Really?
No, coming in, I was a sociology major, and I think everybody was, pretty much, psychology, philosophy. You learn on the job, and that's one of the great things about Draper is, it gives you the chance to learn on the job. Also, I wanted to mention, bringing up Draper, we, for the past few years, we've had Simmons interns, getting credit for, I think it's LS 501, that's the right number. So right now I have 2 Simmons students, and I think it's been great for them getting really hands-on experience, spending 120 hours for the semester. They're on real projects. The projects become their own, learning our systems, coming to meetings with me, and it's been wonderful having the Simmons students. I can't say enough about them, and the high-level research that they do for our clients. So if anyone, I don't know if all of you are finishing up now, or if you still have time to go, but I'd love to have you.
So just to answer or follow on with what kind of background people might have, who might work at Draper. So I work at Lincoln, which is kind of similar. And never let the fact that you might not have some kind of subject expertise stop you. Because even if one of us had an electrical engineering degree or physics or math, that's only one little segment of, so there's chemists and biologists and human factors people, and there's that. So you can't know everything, or business. You don't know all about marketing, or maybe, but you know kind of how to go about finding information, and that's what you sell. So I have no technical skill. I mean, I have no scientific background. I've worked in medical and science libraries pretty much my whole life.
Also, as an add-on to that, I had also been with a law firm for 7 years. I've also actually been unemployed. I've gotten laid off a couple times too. And but all of this was part of my journey, and I actually would not change a thing about my career. But what was interesting is I had been laid off from one of my jobs, and I was trying to figure out, it was actually from one of my vendor jobs, and I was trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do now? Go back to corporate libraries? Do I want to try academic or something? And I kind of looked and I said, well, I've never done legal before, so I came back to Simmons. I started the legal bibliography class, and I was only 2 courses into it. And I needed a job. I saw one advertised at Seyfarth Shaw to start a library. And times were very bad economically for the country at that time, and librarians were getting laid off left and right. A lot of great librarians, but I sent my resume in, and I couldn't believe I got an interview. And then I had another interview, and when they said, do you have any questions? And I said, well, I just want to say thank you for having me in, knowing that I know nothing about law. I've taken 2 classes, I've been to 2 classes, 2 weeks. And they said, oh, that doesn't matter to us. You've got all this business background, and that's what we're looking for. The lawyers can do all their own research. You're going to bring all this business to us. And they were just very, very open-minded. So don't afraid to apply for jobs that you think that, you wouldn't get them. And they had mentioned to me, they said, yeah, we got resumes. We have them on the conference table, a pile this high from law librarians with 20, 30 years of experience, but they didn't have the business that we think that you could bring us. So don't be afraid to apply for things that aren't an exact match for what they're asking for.
So to just interrupt for a second, we're going to have a raffle. And
The importance.
because we're enterprising, because we're the special letters. Anna's going to draw a name. I can help you with those. Yeah. We're going to do this real quick, and then Claudette will be speaking next. I just don't want to hold up the students that may actually not want to get there. They want to talk short.
Yeah.
Maybe it's in Beatley or.
In the meantime, everyone else should feel free to get up and have some more food.
Please have some more food.
Beverages.
He's probably.
And did everyone sign the sign-in sheet?
I was a
That is where we're
contractor,
drawing the
actually,
names
wrote the bulk
from.
of it, yeah.
I think
For
we have the
this.
right number of
90.
names.
Awesome.
No, it was 92 and then it turned into.
Wait, so you don't keep the signing sheet, you're just ripping it up?
No, I copied the names onto another sheet.
Okay.
Larry and that.
It's good and it's bad, surprising.
Jenny that was on too.
Doing something
We had the
extra,
same
I'll make
idea.
things much harder for everyone to do.
Okay, and
We're completely unbiased.
very scientific. You have to pick one.
Oh.
It's not like a
Don't need
magic
it.
trick.
No, you just blow on it, to give it some luck.
And the winner of the t-shirt is Claudette.
I didn't know I was in the drawing.
It'd be great if the one non-alumna.
Now that I'm treasurer, I
I'd be
see
proud.
how, I see how the SLA at Simmons runs on a shoestring, and part of that is because our speakers do come without asking for honoraria. So this is my card if you want to get it size later today, and
Thank you.
back to the subject at hand.
Sure. I just want to pick up with some of the things that Betty said. I want to tell you that I met Betty through SLA. And I later found out she actually was my neighbor. I didn't start my life off as a librarian. I started my life off, I got a degree in English and I was going to teach, and I did for a short while and decided that was not me. I really didn't like the classroom and other stuff related to that. So I had been living in Maine. My husband got a job down here working for an academic computer network. And I decided I wasn't going to look for a teaching job down here. I was going to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I actually thought that I would like to be in business. And I got a job at a local bank. And I worked my way up to being vice president in charge of loan operations. And I worked there for 20 years. And after I'd been there about 18, 19 years, I started thinking, I've been through like 3 bad economic cycles, mortgage bankruptcies, foreclosures of people, all the stuff that really wasn't the fun side of it. And I thought, do I want to do this for probably another 18, 20 years? And I thought, no, I want to try, I'm ready to try something else. So I did what I recommend people do, is I went out and I talked to other people who had jobs that I thought were interesting or were related to the things that I thought I liked to do. And one of the things that I had become interested in, because this was the beginning of the internet and web-based services, and I really thought it was fascinating to see online catalogs. I would go and browse people's online catalogs for fun. I don't know why. I couldn't get the books from them. Some of these places were in Chicago, and I would just try to figure, they would tell you how their catalog was searched. Some of them were really very, you had to do things like AU equals and spaces and all this other stuff. And I decided that I would like to try becoming a librarian, and I spoke to a couple of different librarians. One was a law librarian, one worked in a public library, and when I told my bosses that I was leaving banking, they told me that our firm of auditors had a library, and one of the partners invited me over to see their corporate library, which I did go and see, and I thought, I didn't know these kinds of things existed. And I thought that was really interesting to me, and I thought, this is something I could do with my banking background. So I came to Simmons, and probably the first day I was here, one of the professors told me that if I thought I was going to get a job once I had this degree, I needed some library experience. I'd never worked in a library. I'd never been a page. I didn't work in the academic library when I was in college. So I started looking around for something, not too many hours, not too big, because I thought, I just started going back to school after being out of school for so long. Am I going to be able to manage this? So I found what I call the small job, 10 hours a week, working for an archivist at an educational software company in Cambridge. And I thought this was neat because it combined my interest in technology and software, and I was curious about whether maybe I wanted to be an archivist. So I worked for her. We were archiving things that we couldn't read, basically. We were archiving discs and tapes and audio tapes and videotapes, and we would have slips of paper that the developers and the programmers would give us saying what was in it, and we'd box it up and create finding aids that I don't know how able to find things you would have been in the end, because you needed, some of the machines you needed they were no longer in the company, and I don't know if anybody was keeping any of them. And after a while I decided that was interesting, but I didn't want to be an archivist, and I was there and they had a huge layoff. They had been purchased and they had a huge layoff, and I got there one morning and all the doors were locked, and I knew nothing. I'm knocking on the door, a guy comes along and says, you need to go up to the whatever floor HR was on, and I went up and they said, who are you? And I told them who I was, and they said, well, you're not on the layoff list, so I guess we can let you back in. So they reactivated my card key, and I went back and went to the floor where I was working, and a fellow came along and kind of looked at me and said, who do you work for? And I said, well, I work for the archivist. He said, oh, okay. He said, I don't think we've met before, but I've been, I work here. I've been working here for, for how many, 5 years. And there's only 2 of us left on this floor besides the archivist.
Wow.
So that was my first really surprise at corporate layoffs. But I learned basically what they did was not a really good way to lay people off or let them go. They did the, here's the box, here's the escort, out of the building you go. And my boss, the archivist, hadn't been there the day that they did that. She had been out sick. So when she came in, and I was already there, she had to check to see if I was going to be able to stay, because she figured they were keeping her, but she didn't know if they were going to keep me as a student worker. And they didn't care, because it was, as far as they were concerned, it was very little money, and it wasn't, and they needed more help, because now they had even more stuff that they were boxing up and that they were going to send off-site. I decided I really wasn't too interested in continuing, so I found another job, which was at a law library, the law library at Liberty Mutual. And it was again, I didn't work a lot of hours, but it was a really neat job. I worked for a great director of law libraries. Betty knows him, Les Peet, who went to other law libraries, but he basically, I was the only assistant he had, so I got to do almost anything. I did the check-in for all the law things. I helped people figure out how to use Westlaw and Lexis. I shelved, I just did, he would ask me if I wanted to do something, and I would do it. And I stayed there for probably over a year. In the meantime, I thought, well, everybody I know is going into academic libraries, and is always talking about doing reference, and maybe I should get some more reference experience, because it is interesting. So I got a job at Northeastern in the Snell Library, 1 shift a week, which was basically I worked 5 hours on Sundays. And that really helped me to get more experience in a wide range of reference areas. And like Betty said, you know, it's, you learn how to do research and reference in different subject matters. People would ask me about how to read chem abstracts. I'm like, it's over there.
Yeah.
Or let me set you up on the computer with that, please. And good luck to you, because if you ask me another question, I'm gone. But I did learn a lot of different databases and how to help people at least get started in their searches. After a while, another opportunity came up to go to work for a small firm of financial advisors. And I worked with their librarian to create what we called company files. Now, most of those today probably are pretty much electronic. We were in the midst of being paper and electronic, and they had not yet moved all of the resources to the desktops of the analysts. So we were doing research on Bloomberg machines for them, and Blipper and Backset and all of these other types of databases that were available, and creating half and half things of places that still were using only paper for annual reports and filings, and other places that were moving everything they had onto digital means. And then I graduated and started looking for my first real job. And
In that order?
And my first real job was at Fidelity Investments. It was the job that I really, really wanted. I had applied for a different job. I had actually applied for a job that was doing industry research, which I really didn't have the background for, but I had been doing the company files. And instead, they promoted someone from within and offered me her position, which was being in charge of their reference collection. And that to me seemed like I just really wanted to do that. And they also were at about the same time converting to an online catalog system that was going to be available for the people in that part of Fidelity. So I went to work for them. We, finding things that could be used for reference works, finding things that were being converted to online so that we no longer needed paper copies of them, and also working on this catalog conversion. So I learned firsthand what goes into a catalog conversion. Worked there for 6 years. I became the manager of information collections and systems, which basically was, I was in charge of the collections, both of the reference collections and our industry and company collections, and merged a couple of libraries, and also was in charge of the catalog. I was approached, as Betty says, if you know people, you will get approached for things that they think that you could do or would be good at. And I was approached to go to the Congregational Library. They were looking to convert their print catalog, and I do mean print catalog, little cards and everything, to an online catalog. It was not for the same amount of money I was making at Fidelity, but it did have some benefits that I thought offset some of the things. It was pretty much meeting free. I had a lot more autonomy because I basically was in charge of the library and what went on, and I would have the ability to hire staff pretty much that I wanted, because our executive director is the executive director of the association that owns the library, that has the library. And she's not a librarian, she's a researcher and historian. So I went over there and started the process. I will say, it was like night and day. I was used to like very fast paced. Remember, I came from banking, I did things in corporate libraries. People want everything yesterday, why hasn't it happened yet? And I went to this place where when I told them we could have, I started in January, told them that we could be up and start putting records into a catalog by June, they thought that was totally amazing. Amazing. I was like, okay, I'll take that. But a much different pace. And so one of the things that I think I want to tell you, don't be afraid to take on challenges. You know, it was a challenge. I'm not a congregationalist. I'm not a theological librarian. I didn't study religion. I approached it as these are things that you can learn. They were looking for certain things. They were looking for somebody who could manage, someone who understood what kinds of technologies that libraries might need. And you know, to me, it was a real opportunity to shape a library, almost really taking a library that still was very 19th century, very paper focused, and bring it into the 21st century. And now we have digital projects going on, we have a digital archivist, we also have a lot of students that have worked for us either through regular internships or through volunteer opportunities, working on various projects and moving things along. But the other thing I want to say is don't hesitate to approach people and ask them about their jobs. I have that happen all the time. I love to talk about how I got to where I am. I don't think any of us really take really straight lines. I mean, I know a few people, but most people, you know, are not always on the same straight line. You go in different directions and things interest you more than other things, and you develop your skills, so it's very helpful. I belong to SLA, but I also belong to the American Theological Library Association. It's a small association of mainly seminary and religious schools, but I find it a very congenial group, although I'm not as interested as some of them are in theological discussion. They have to remember, they're librarians. And most of them are librarians first and religious secondarily.
Okay, thank you so much. Speaking of somewhat straight lines, Rob, while having worked for Raytheon and the Army Research Center, you have been at Lincoln for 25 years. I just wanted to mention, you talked about Liberty Mutual. So Jim Matarazza, the advisor for the SLA at Simmons, actually mentioned last week to me that there is a position in knowledge management that's opened up. So he has that incredible bulletin board outside his office at the other end of the hall, and then he also has annexed himself in the James Matarazza Lounge with job postings. So don't hesitate to look, because there's a Liberty Mutual's opportunity that's come up. And Rob, if you could share some of your experience with us.
So I will tell you how I got to my present position and what path I took. And in thinking about what to say, I was reflecting back on, you know, why I went into the library field. So I was kind of wondering why you guys are in library schools. Anybody, you know, and actually, do you call yourself a librarian, or is there some other term? Because SLA for a while has tried to get away, in my mind, from the term librarian. But
The L word.
why are you guys studying,
I prefer to call it information professional, and I'm interested in records management, and the reason I came back to school was because I needed to refresh my skills after being away from work while I was raising children.
Okay. Anybody else? Need a job?
So, I mean, I came to library science from a more academic direction, so I consider myself to be trying to be a librarian because I realized I was in a master's for something in the humanities, and I realized I was learning more from the librarian who never went to school to be for library science and didn't actually doesn't know anything about this subset of the field than I was sometimes learning from the professors who got their PhDs, and I didn't really want to start teaching, and so yeah. But I can see information professional making more sense from the outside of people who think of librarians from a 19th century perspective, and then just well, I know historically why librarians are important, but why do we need you now that we have the internet,
Right.
And Josh, if you can tell everybody, since we're on videotape, if you can tell everybody what your name is.
Oh, yes, so I'm Josh. Jasper? Josh Jasper.
Anybody else?
Oh, yeah, I
Yep.
can. I'm Elise Edwards, and I wanted to be a librarian since I could walk and read. So
Okay.
I've always been an introductory for me, but I think probably the reason why librarian is not a good term anymore is just because the nature of information has changed, and it's become very evident that the skills that we possess as librarians are needed to knowledge or to manage this just overwhelming amount of information in all its many facets that we have currently. So.
Right.
And I'm coming here from, I'm Susan Alden, and I'm coming here, I was a high school teacher for many years, and as the curriculum started to change towards inquiry and 21st century skills and critical thinking skills, they wanted us to go towards the library and to start working in conjunction with the library. So I finally got myself there to start the process, and I just really enjoyed what the librarians were doing, and they said, how can I help you? And I don't think I'd heard that in the past 10 years. And they were teachers, and they seemed like they were enjoying what they were doing, but they seemed like they weren't as frazzled and depleted as some of maybe the subject teachers as I was. And so I came into this program as in the school library teacher program, and I have just recently switched because I didn't realize how many different varieties of information professions were out there, so that's what I'm here trying to figure out.
Great.
I feel like it's the same for me.
Yeah, so much.
Just, I know that there's a couple of straightforward paths, like you were saying, academic, public school, but then there are all these tiny facets of the special library that I don't really know very much about.
So, sure.
I'm Catherine Philbin. I'm coming back looking at coming back to work after a long period of taking care of children. I have a kind of dual educational background. My formal education is all in literature and linguistics. But I worked in market research before my children were born, so I have some idea of what working in knowledge management would be like and having clients in a more corporate setting. And as I was thinking about something to do next, I first considered this from the angle of working for a university, but I also do have corporate experience, and I live in New Hampshire, so I live near a few universities, but I still live closer to Fidelity Investments and BAE Systems and a couple of other companies where it might make sense to work, so I'm interested in exploring these other information management avenues.
And I'm Anna Martin, and I have always been a book person, and it's a little bit of a cliche, but that is part of why I decided to go to library school. I worked for Barnes & Noble for 9 years, did a brief stint in a bank for about 9 months and then worked for Apple in their retail division for 5 more years. During that time, I started here in 2010, had a kind of personal upheaval and took a 2-year hiatus because I was questioning everything, including my decision to go to school. And then in spring of 2013, decided to come back and finish. And my area of interest is art librarianship, and I'm taking a rare books class now and also figuring out that that's another setting I'd be really, really happy in. But I still just love how many options there are, and just directions to go and
Right.
doors that open.
That's great.
I don't know if I mentioned Anna's the SLA Simmons archivist.
Yes.
Very good.
All right, I'll go. My name's Tim Silva, and let's see, I got into librarianship after previous careers as an archaeologist and as a sort of manager of conservation open space for a large statewide nonprofit here in Massachusetts. And I can't say exactly why I wanted to go into librarianship, except
Come
maybe
on, tell us.
All right.
But not really.
Um,
You've been at the head.
It won't
Yeah.
go beyond these 4 walls.
Right. Okay, so I actually got into librarianship to save the world.
All right.
No, it's the service aspect of the profession appealed to me strongly. I haven't quite figured out what area of librarianship I want to go into. I have a strong interest in public libraries. My first ever job was in a public library when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I had a very part-time job in the children's room of my local public library for $1.50 an hour, I think it was,
Oh, yeah, really?
which was big money back in those days.
Yeah, something.
At that
But,
age,
what's that?
at that age too.
Yeah. So, yeah, I really am, the mission of libraries in general, just helping people get information, helping to, accomplish some sort of mission as part of a team, that appeals to me a great deal. And because I couldn't figure out what else I wanted to specifically study, I thought, well, if I'm a librarian, I can look up anything that interests me, so there you go.
I have a question for the panel based on what you were just saying, of the whole mission of libraries in general, which is kind of more of a philosophy that doesn't have to be, and especially with corporate libraries. Is there any sort of conflict in your mind? Because truly, for a corporate library, it seems like sometimes it's not about giving information to the entire world, it's about giving information so that your small subset of customers, for lack of a better term, can succeed. Is there some conflict in that? Internal conflict?
So I work for a
I'm sorry.
federally funded research and development center, which is mainly sponsored by the DOD. So do I like war? No. Do I have to give my information only to my clients? Yeah. Does it bother me? Not usually. Once in a while I think to myself, you people are so smart, why don't you figure out how to solve poverty? I don't know, but you know what I mean? And, so I get a paycheck and I'm easily bought off, I guess.
I didn't mean to offend.
You're not. I don't know if anybody else.
I would tell you, it really didn't bother me at Fidelity. I considered that they were using information to, create investments, and those, and though we couldn't share anything like that, the point is the bottom line. Does that benefit other people outside the library? Probably, just like the work that's being done at the labs benefits public outside of the library. So does it bother you to not be able to share everything? No, and everyone isn't interested in all of what you may have, you might think it's really interesting and other people would want to know about it and should be out there. But there's a lot out there already that, you know, in the cases of for-profit companies, to me, there's a wider world benefit, or as a nonprofit that's doing research that's then used in some fashion to benefit the public, I think, you know.
Right, so where I work, Lincoln Lab, I'm not sure about Draper, but was one of the first, you know, they were one of the first on the internet and developing computers and making computers and stuff like that, which obviously has changed the world, so, you know, is that good? I guess so.
Yeah, similar to what Bob said, my first, Rob, I always call you Bob.
That's okay.
Okay. My first stint at Draper from 78 to 83, our basic focus was on defense work and aerospace work, so missiles, you know, kind of Cold War stuff, even though it was later than that. And, but now, like, after being gone for 27 years and coming back, I mean, I loved the lab then, but even more so now, the subject areas, because now we're really heavily into biomedical. And, yeah, so, and I see the devices that we're developing for the Department of Defense, but that will then be commercialized. I mean, things to help people hear and see and, you know, just different bodily types of things, and there's just so much out there for us. And I see these announcements coming out and demos of what we're doing. I say, wow, this is going to change people's lives, you know. And I can much more get my arms around like these medical things that we're developing, rather than, you know, around a Trident missile, you know, and weapons of mass destruction. And so I guess in my mind, that's how I justify what I do.
So, so I went to library school for many of the same reasons that you guys mentioned. I'm glad none of you mentioned that you thought you'd get rich or make a lot of money. Probably not going to happen. But the other reason why I was intrigued with libraries, so my undergraduate was business. The other reason why I was intrigued with libraries was I wanted to be mobile. I kind of thought, wow, I could work in a city, I could work in a rural area, all towns have libraries, all universities, corporate. So I thought, wow, this is cool. So that was also a reason why I did it. So when I was going to library school, Long Island University, CW Post, I was working in a bakery from midnight to 7 a.m. and then I'd go to class, and in one of the classes, somebody came in and a fellow student came in and said, there's an opening in the library I work at, is anybody interested? So I went out to an interview at the Veterans Administration Medical Center in Northport, New York, which is on Long Island. Got the job, got 20 hours a week, and they had two libraries. A lot of medical centers, at least VA medical centers back then, I don't know what they do now, had two libraries. They have a medical library and they have a patient's library. Medical obviously is technical, the patient's library is more public. It's for the patients, because there are many long-term patients at VA hospitals, so it was more like a public library. We'd have programs or educational programs, and so it was great doing that. I worked weekends, I worked nights, I quit the bakery job. You know, I made cannolis.
You wanted to make dough a different way.
There you go. So I got my degree and I applied for a job at the H.W. Wilson Company, which is an abstracting and indexing company in the Bronx. And they put out, if you're familiar with or maybe heard of Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature, they put that out and a number of other subject indexes. So I got a job reading business periodicals, indexing, so I'd read articles, assign subject headings, approve subject headings, whatever. And I did that for about a year. And then I got offered a job at a place called the Conference Board, which is an economic think tank in Manhattan. And that was great. That was a huge experience. But I only did that a short time, 6 months, because I got offered a job in Miami at the VA Medical Center in Miami. So I took that, it was like $5,000 more a year. It's tough living in Manhattan on $11,000, you know. So anyhow, that was great. I worked mainly in the patient's library, but also the medical library, got experience. Didn't like Miami, moved to New England, didn't have a job, but I took down the names of the VA folks up here, like the directors of the library. There was like 5 or 6 or even more in New England. A couple in Boston, one in Bedford, one in Brockton, Connecticut, a couple of places. So, speaking of not only library associations, but consortiums, I went to a medical library consortium meeting to specifically track down Sandy Jagendorf, who was the director of the VA Bedford Library. So I go into the meeting, I'm sitting at the meeting, and other people are talking, and I go, does anybody know a woman named Sandy Jagendorf? And he says, I'm Sandy. So I chatted with him, told him, you know, who I was, and I'd worked in VA libraries, and so he gave me an interview, and he said he didn't have anything, but in like 3 months he gave me a call, and I got a job. Patient's Library, the Bedford facility is a psych facility. They do some medical, but it's a psychiatric facility, and this is like not long after Vietnam. So there was a lot of that's when I learned about post-traumatic stress disorder and a lot of stuff. I eventually moved over to the medical library, paid more, it's kind of more exciting. You could really feel like you helped. And then we got a computer. And we could search Medline. And I had to actually argue with my boss, Sandy, who wanted the computer on his desk, but didn't do any of the searching, that it should be in the medical library. And so that's when I learned how to do that kind of searching for information. You do a search, this thing, printout would come up, rip it off and give it to the people. Anyhow, that was great. I did that about 3 years, and then I got a job at the Army Research Center in Watertown, Massachusetts. A sci-tech place that's not there anymore. They worked on materials and mechanics and another whole range of stuff that I didn't know anything about, a lot of chemistry and material science. So I did that a couple of years, then I went and worked for Raytheon, defense contractor, who similar kind of stuff, but more in the business world. So I got to meet marketing people and, you know, program manager types, people who don't really understand, in my mind, libraries. They ask questions like, get me everything in Brazil on blah blah, and you go, I don't have the resources. So that is actually something, you can be the best librarian in the world. If you don't have any funding, if you're a 1 or 2 person library, you are a star because you're working your butt off just to try to keep treading water. So that's what I did for a while. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about, like these guys are saying, when you're in the corporate world, it's a lot different. Money counts, programs count, success of programs count. So when they get a contract, you go, woo, we're happy. And then I applied for this wild job at Lincoln Laboratory. The job description was absolutely insane. I can't remember it, but it was just like, what is this? It listed like, you're going to do that and that and that and that, and but I applied. Got an interview, they offered me the job, and it's great. I started out as a reference librarian there. Then I became a supervisor of archives and like government documents, and then I became a supervisor of the reference area, and now I am the team lead for the Research and Awareness Group. We're not a library, we're called Knowledge Services Group, even though I still say we're a library and I'm a librarian. I have 8 people who report to me. There are 25 people who work in the library and archives there. And so I run the reference area. And I have 5 professional librarians. I've recently hired 3, that means in the past few years. So some positions would vanish, but we were able to get other positions. It's not really like we added jobs. 2 of them have biology degrees, and 1 of them worked in the biomed field for 25 years before he decided to become a librarian. So they're really knowledgeable as the lab has moved into biomed. In fact, you know Todd Ryder?
Oh, yeah, he's
So
with
this
us
guy,
now.
Todd Ryder, worked at Lincoln, and he, I'm gonna say within the past year, went to Draper. He's got this,
He's up for a huge award. It's
Yeah.
basically the
he
Nobel
might have
Prize.
figured out how to make, I don't understand, but he causes cancer cells to commit suicide. And if this works, it's like gonna cure viruses, it's just like amazing. Anyhow, he got, he's been written up in New York Times and Wall Street Journal and Draper stole him. So there's a lot of stuff going on in these labs that are very interesting, and we get all kinds of wild questions. But the lab has 3,700 folks, 1,500 are PhD, electrical engineering, physics, math, human factors, some bio, some chem, material science, lots of stuff. I don't know anything, but I can help people find information. I know where to look, and that's what all my team does. We really do intense reference interviews with people, find out what they want, search through databases, package the information, send it off to them, get their feedback, maybe repurpose the search. We also then keep them informed in their areas of interest by setting up alerts, which you guys probably know about. We also sit on lab committees where we can hopefully help people get programs, learn about stuff. We'll find funding information, package information that way, and we also try to keep track of content for them because researchers are the worst. They don't name things, they don't put dates in. So we try to, if we're lucky enough to get on a committee, and we can ask or try to ask, and some people will say yes, some people will say no, and we'll try to organize their information for them. Wait, what else did I do? Okay, so a lot of library work is working with people. I mean, I guess unless you're a systems person, so you're in a back room, but that's what I like about it, working with all these different people. For the most part, I think people are fun and interesting, and that's great. They usually love telling you what they're doing. So, while I'm thinking about how I might do a search, they're talking and I can ask some questions and interact, and it's really fun. One of the big things we do at the lab is all of us scan materials in the areas that the lab is interested in. And I said here we're doing air traffic control, space surveillance, weather sensing, biochem defense, cybersecurity, all kinds of stuff. And what we feel we're doing is helping post stuff to blogs, and people subscribe to the blogs, and hopefully they find newsy or funding or technical information that's of use to them. So that's a lot of what we do. And I've been there 25 years. I just got a letter from MIT. So MIT runs Lincoln Laboratory. Lincoln Lab's in Lexington. It is not campus, it's not students, but they have the contract. It's like MITRE or RAND or Los Alamos, it's a place like that. So I got a letter from the Quarter Century Club of MIT. I've been invited to join, which is a tough requirement. You have to be at MIT for 25 years. And I can get a chair. I can get a rocking chair. I can get a regular chair.
Wheelchair?
Yeah.
Good one. I can get a watch.
I want all the ones.
So I think we'll get a regular chair. But anyhow, it's been great. And I do want to say, so SLA is great. Medical Library Association is great. I know Betty's heavily involved as a leader person, whereas me, I was just kind of went to the meetings and was, but enjoyed them. But I never really jumped in and did stuff. Well, I did actually for one thing. There's a defense DTIC, which is like, you guys know what NTIS is? National Technical Information Service. So they're kind of tasked with trying to gather all the reports generated by R&D money that the government spends on agriculture and energy and DOD and, health and homeland defense. And people are supposed to deposit their stuff with them. So it's out of the stream of journals and books, because they're technical reports. They have a really short lifespan, or they used to have a really short lifespan, now they're electronic, hopefully. But the DTIC is defense related. So defense contractors or places like Draper and Lincoln are supposed to deposit stuff at DTIC because the government spent this money and they should, get the deliverable back, which could be a product or it could be a report. So anyhow, DTIC is like NTIS, except it's DOD related, and I was on that committee for a while. Yep.
Oh, I just had a question. There was a phrase you used to connect up your story, and then I applied to Lincoln Lab. So as we're doing this quilt of our careers, in your mind, the picture of your story, were you always having feelers out no matter where you were about the next thing? I mean, I know you've been at Lincoln for a long time now, but.
Yeah, I always wanted more money. I mean, really, you start out, you get paid, well, I don't know what I got paid, $12,000 a year or something. Actually, I think the Wilson Company got $10,000 a year. Conference Board, I got $11,000. I went to the VA in Miami, I got $17,000. I'm down there. But you also kind of want to, as a younger person.
You want to keep it interesting.
Yeah, and you want to, in my mind, I wanted to move around. I wanted, I kind of hit a boundary and I wanted to move on, usually. Or I thought I'd want to supervise and get into management. And,
So what have they done to keep you?
Lincoln?
The chair?
Yeah, no, Lincoln's amazing. I'm not, Lincoln, so as I mentioned, if you're a one-person or two-person library and you don't have any funding, if you have to write out a form for why you need a pencil, and justify 2 cents, it's horrible. So Lincoln's well-funded, big library. So we have a physical library. We have tons of electronic resources. It's got an archives. We have a really good reputation. We really help researchers find information. So I did a Google search and I couldn't find blah blah. And so you go and you send them stuff and they go, wow, this is great. I couldn't find it. And we collect metrics. So we send out surveys. Sometimes they answer them. Sometimes they don't. But they'll say, we ask, how much time did we save you? Did we save you time? Did you share the information with your team, your boss, your program sponsor? And I forget, we might say something else. And we gather that stuff. And, you have to, so libraries are always overhead. So we always have to justify what we're doing and why we're doing it and gather that kind of information. What was the question?
You answered the question. You're saying that Lincoln's a place where you can actually accomplish something because you have the resources and you don't have to spend a lot of your energy justifying your existence.
Right. You still do, but we have a nice budget and, we have a lot of people who work there and we do a great job. We do a really good job.
I think Rob's point too about collecting metrics applies to all libraries, especially today, for whatever reason. If you're looking for grant money, even though we're in a nonprofit, we're always asking how many people use things, what did they use, what's the result, did they write a book, did they publish an article, do we have a copy of that? So I think no matter where you work, you have to be aware that you may not have to justify it for your budget all the time, but people do want to know, why are you important to your organization? And what makes you important?
And as I'm sure, within the age of the internet, Google, and everybody can find anything they want, supposedly. But, so that's a big thing, because, especially kind of people who run the money, not the researchers, the money guys, they don't really in my mind, use libraries too much.
Yeah, and the thing is to do this continuously, not when you start to hear rumblings of layoffs and cut. I mean, by then it's too late. I mean, you're a goner.
You have to be proactive.
Yeah.
I think I finished.
I just had a couple of questions. First one is, well, if it's a really large library, do they sort of facilitate professional development, or is that always something you have to go out and get to keep up with the latest programs or the latest theory?
Right.
And then just more personally, do you want to say anything about work-life balance over the years? I mean, if you've been somewhere 25 years, sounds okay.
So, we've had a number of, is that to me? Anyway, so I'll just, so at Lincoln, if I wanted to go to school, so we've hired a few people who probably were going to Simmons, or maybe some even before they started going to Simmons, and MIT Lincoln Laboratory will give them a certain amount of money for a course or courses that are job related. So I don't remember how much that is, but that's helped a lot of people. And we've hired a few people who've got their MLS, and some have stayed, and some have moved on because they couldn't get a professional job at Lincoln, so they went on to a lot of other places. And the archives people, same thing. A number of folks in our archives department, got their MLS and couldn't get a full, a professional job, so they, went elsewhere. For career development, for me, if I wanted to take a course at Simmons or go to some, SLA program, and it's certainly in this area, it's not a problem. So we're mainly government money, depending on how the government's doing. We can get funding or partial funding to go to conferences. So I might go to SLA this year or whatever.
Yeah, from pretty much all of the organizations that I've worked for, professional development has really been supported. And that's one of the questions that I would always ask in the interview, because that was always important to me. And I figure I'm the one developing my career, so if I want to go to classes, whatever, I want to make sure that things are in place to do that. At Draper, they pay for half of my SLA dues, so I think it's about 400 or something. I'm in a lot of different divisions because our subject areas are so diverse. So they'll pay for half of that. And local meetings are no problem if there's an SLA meeting locally or, even in New England Drive or whatever. Conferences can be tricky, so what I've done over the years and also how I've gotten so involved in SLA is that I get on committees, and then the SLA division basically pays for my airfare, my hotel and everything. So in the last couple of years, I was the engineering division planner for the conference in San Diego last year. So, and that was basically an 18-month commitment. And they paid for the 3 conferences and winter meetings before that for me, so I didn't have to ask my employer. My employer had no problem giving me the time off. It's considered work time. And then after that stint finished, the military libraries division approached me to be the program planner. The Boston conference is going to be, the SLA conference is going to be in Boston in 2015. So I'm the program planner for all the military division programs. And so they paid for me to go to the SLA winter meeting in Memphis, to Vancouver, and then there'll be the winter meeting next January. So there's always kind of ways that you kind of wiggle your way in to get what you want, so.
We're very small, but one of the things I asked when I went from Fidelity that was paying for everything was what they would pay for. And basically, we support professional development. It is up to people to find things, but if I see things that I think someone on the staff should be going to, our group tends to do a lot of webinars, which frequently are free because we belong to the Massachusetts library system. We belong to LYRASIS. I belong to SLA. We also have an institutional membership to ALA. So every staff member, if they're full-time, gets one organization membership paid. We also pay proportionately for our part-time employees to belong to one organization. As far as conferences go, a lot of it depends on where it is, as far as, but we do pay for people to go to no more than one conference. So if I wanted to go to 2 conferences, I have to figure out how to manage that. I have been able to manage it a couple of times where they were piggybacked, and so I did a plane ride here. I paid for the plane ride to the next conference, and they paid for me to come back home. There are ways. there are ways of managing some of these things, and I think you have to be upfront and tell people when you're interviewing that professional development is important to you. And as someone who hires people, I want to hear that. I don't want to hear that you're going to come, to work for us, but you don't want to grow. You don't want to learn new things. The group that I supervise is always looking for free development opportunities, and they do webinars on work time, and going to conference is considered work time, and if someone has to be someplace on the weekend, they do get compensated, either comp time or pay for being at a conference. And the other thing is to be presenters at conferences, to do poster sessions, be on panels, be a speaker. In some situations, you might not be able to disclose information that is part of your job, but there are ways that you can participate in more general ways as well. But you're in charge of your career, don't forget that, not where you work.
And as far as your question about the work balance, when I was in the law firm, it was definitely, it was similar to when you mentioned at Fidelity. You were always on, and the attorneys, if someone was getting sued, we always did the big cases, and it was, they were gonna choose counsel. We wanted to make sure it was gonna be us, so we'd hear about the case, and everybody would jump on it. And I was working, I had a lot of flexibility in my work hours, but a lot of these things came through at 10 at night, so I'd be in front of the TV kind of going through, stuff while I'm working also. And then I would, go in later in the morning as well to get out the information to the attorneys. So, but you could easily burn yourself out. So.
Well, are there any other questions? Fantastic, thank you so
Yes.
much for
Perfect.
coming.
Thanks for coming.
Sure, so is
Yes.
there an MLA student chapter, or is it just SLA? Or ALA student chapter?
M as in medical?
Yeah,
Uh,
here.
We hosted someone representing the National Library of Medicine, Meredith Solomon, who's in Worcester. So it comes under our umbrella. Anything that's not SLTP, archives, public, or academic is us, because we're special.
We're special.
And it really covers almost everything else. We're pretty open. Sometimes we collaborate with the archivists on programs like that. Did you ask for a particular?
I was just curious.
Yeah. Yeah, we visited a couple of law firms, Ropes Gray and Edwards Wildman, and we keep up that connection also. We do resume events.
Well, thank you all for your
Thank
time.
you.